The fluorescent lights in Sacred Heart Hospital's emergency room flickered at 2:47 a.m., casting shadows that danced across blood-stained linoleum. Elena Reyes had been on her feet for 11 hours straight, her third consecutive night shift, and the coffee she'd stolen from the nurse's station had gone cold in her trembling hands 3 hours ago. Her scrubs, the same pair she'd been washing in her bathroom sink for 2 weeks because the laundromat cost $7 she didn't have, stuck to her back with sweat and exhaustion. She was supposed to be studying for her pharmacology exam, not mopping up someone else's vomit in hallway C, but the hospital paid her $12.50 an hour, and her student loans wouldn't defer themselves. The scream cut through the usual chaos of the ER like a knife through silk. Elena's head snapped up. She'd heard every kind of pain in this place. The wailing of mothers who'd lost children, the roars of men with compound fractures, the quiet sobs of the dying, but this sound carried something different. Desperation. The kind that came from watching someone you loved slip away while you stood helpless. She abandoned her mop and moved toward the sound, her worn sneakers squeaking against the floor. The hallway opened into Trauma Bay 3, where at least 15 people in expensive suits crowded around a gurney. Not family, security. The kind of men who wore their violence like cologne, subtle but unmistakable. They parted slightly as a woman in bloodied designer clothes collapsed against the wall, her screaming dissolving into Italian prayers that Elena's grandmother had taught her to recognize even if she couldn't speak the language. "We need AB negative now," Dr. Chen's voice cracked with urgency. "The blood bank is empty. We've called every hospital in a 50-mile radius. Nothing." Elena pushed closer, her medical training overriding every survival instinct that told her to walk away from whatever this was. Through the gap in the crowd, she saw him. A boy, maybe 7 years old, his small chest barely rising beneath the oxygen mask. 3 bullet wounds, she counted automatically. Chest, shoulder, abdomen. Someone had tried to kill a child. "His pressure's dropping," a nurse called out. "We're losing him." The woman's screams intensified. One of the suited men grabbed Dr. Chen by the collar. "Save him, whatever it costs, whatever you need." "I need blood," Dr. Chen shoved the man away. "AB negative universal plasma. Without it, he dies in the next 10 minutes. Elena's hand went to her arm, to the small scar from the blood drive she'd participated in last month. They'd told her she had a rare blood type, AB negative, universal plasma donor, 1 in every 167 people. She'd thought it was just an interesting fact, something to mention at parties she never got invited to because she was too busy working and studying to have friends. She pushed through the crowd. "I'm AB negative." Every head turned toward her. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "Elena, you're sure?" "Tested last month. I have the card in my locker." Her voice steadied even as her hands shook. "How much do you need?" "As much as you can give. We need to start a direct transfusion until we can get proper units flown in." Dr. Chen was already pulling her toward the gurney. "This is dangerous. You could—" "He's a child." Elena looked down at the boy's face, so pale it was almost translucent. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and afraid. "Just do it." "Where are you watching from?" The next 45 minutes existed in a haze of needles and machines and the steady rhythm of her blood flowing into a dying child. They positioned her in a chair beside his gurney, her arm extended, watching the deep red of her life force travel through plastic tubing into his small body. The suited men watched her with expressions she couldn't read: suspicion, gratitude, calculation. The woman who'd been screaming now stood silent in the corner, her mascara-streaked face locked on Elena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Talk to him," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Keep him conscious if you can." Elena reached out with her free hand and found the boy's fingers, so small and cold. "Hey there, Piccolo. I'm Elena. You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay." His eyes opened again, clearer now. He looked at her with something like wonder, his lips moving beneath the oxygen mask. She leaned closer. "Angel," he whispered. "You're my angel." Something cracked open in her chest. "Just a medical student, but I've got good blood, apparently." The ghost of a smile touched his lips before his eyes drifted closed again. Not dying now. Sleeping. The machines beeped steadier rhythms. Dr. Chen monitored both their vital signs, his expression shifting from panic to cautious hope. "His pressure's stabilizing," a nurse announced, "the bleeding slowing." A collective exhale moved through the room. The woman in the corner sank to her knees, her prayers shifting from desperate pleas to grateful thanks. One of the suited men stepped outside, phone already at his ear, speaking rapid Italian that Elena's exhausted brain couldn't follow. "That's enough," Dr. Chen said, checking Elena's blood pressure for the third time. "Any more and you'll be the one in trouble." The world tilted sideways as they disconnected her. Someone caught her before she hit the floor. One of the suited men, his grip surprisingly gentle. They laid her on a gurney, started an IV, covered her with heated blankets. Her body felt hollow, wrung out, but when she turned her head she could see the boy's chest rising and falling with more strength than before. Worth it. Whatever happened next, that image was worth it. She must have dozed because when she opened her eyes again, the room had changed. The woman was gone. Dr. Chen was gone. Most of the suited men were gone. But the ones who remained had multiplied, their positions strategic, blocking every exit. And standing at the foot of her gurney was a man who made every instinct in her body scream danger. He was tall, 6'4" at least, with shoulders that strained against a custom suit that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. Silver touched the temples of his dark hair, and his face looked like it had been carved from marble by an angry sculptor, all sharp angles and harder edges. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, dark, intense, swimming with an emotion she couldn't name. He stared at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, a threat he needed to neutralize, a miracle he couldn't quite believe in. Then he moved, and Elena's breath caught. This man who commanded a room full of dangerous men, who wore violence like a second skin, who had the kind of presence that made even doctors step back, he dropped to his knees beside her gurney. "You gave your blood for my son." His voice was rough, accent thick, each word seemingly dragged from somewhere deep and painful. "You didn't know him, didn't know me, you just gave." Elena's mouth went dry. She tried to sit up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. "He was dying. I could help, that's all." "That's all." He repeated her words like they were in a foreign language. His hands gripped the gurney rail, knuckles white. "Who sent you? Who do you work for?" What?" Confusion cut through her exhaustion. "I work here. I'm a medical student. I mop floors and change bedpans and try not to fail out because I'm too tired to study." "You expect me to believe you just happen to be here? Just happen to have the exact blood type my son needs? Just happen to volunteer to save the life of a stranger?" His voice rose slightly and the men around them shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. "I expect you to believe the truth." Elena met his eyes, too tired to be properly afraid. "I heard someone screaming. I saw a child dying. I had blood he needed. I gave it. That's the whole story." He studied her face for a long moment, searching for deception she didn't have the energy to manufacture. Then his expression cracked, just slightly, and she saw past the dangerous exterior to something raw underneath. Grief. Fear. The kind of terror that came from almost losing everything that mattered. "Papa?" The small voice came from across the room. Elena turned her head to see the boy awake now, propped up on pillows, his color already better than it had been. He looked past his father, past all the dangerous men, directly at Elena. "Where's the angel lady? I want the angel lady." The man, his father, closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, something had shifted. He stood, walked to his son, spoke to him in soft Italian that made the boy's face crease with worry. Then he returned to Elena's bedside. "My name is Dominic Castellano." He said it like she should, recognize it, and maybe if she paid attention to anything beyond medical journals and student loan statements, she would have. "You saved my son's life, Marco's life, and now I need to know everything about you. Why?" Elena managed to sit up this time, though her head swam with the effort. "I helped, that's it. I don't want anything from you." "That's what worries me." Dominic gestured to one of his men who produced a tablet and began typing. "No one does something for nothing, especially not for my family. So either you're incredibly naive, incredibly stupid, or incredibly dangerous. Or incredibly decent," Elena shot back, anger cutting through her exhaustion. "Some people still help others without expecting payment." "Not in my world." His expression hardened. "And whether you intended to or not, you're in my world now. You touched my son. Your blood is in his veins. That creates a bond, a connection. My enemies will learn about you. They'll wonder what you mean to me, to Marco. They'll try to use you. Then I'll leave, tonight. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Elena reached for the IV in her arm, ready to remove it herself. Too late. The man with the tablet looked up. Elena Reyes, 28, third-year medical student at Sacred Heart University, lives alone at 847 Morrison Street, apartment 2B. Works 3 jobs to cover tuition, no family, no close friends, student loan debt of $147,000, checking account balance of $63.42. Last meal was yesterday afternoon, a protein bar from the vending machine. He kept reading, listing details of her life that she'd thought were private, and Elena felt her world tilt in a new direction. "How do you?" "I know everything about everyone who gets close to my family." Dominic's voice softened slightly. "I have to. But your background checks out. You're exactly what you appear to be, a broke student trying to survive, which means you really did save Marco because you're a good person. And that..." He paused, something like wonder crossing his face. "That's more dangerous than any enemy I have." "I don't understand." "You will." He gestured to his men. "We're leaving, all of us. I'm not going anywhere with you." Elena tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Dominic caught her before she fell, his grip strong but careful. "You just gave a pint and a half of blood. You can barely walk, and my son is asking for you." He nodded toward Marco, who was indeed straining against the nurses trying to keep him in bed, his eyes locked on Elena with desperate need. "You started this when you saved his life. Now you have to finish it." "Finish what?" "Making sure he survives." Dominic lifted her like she weighed nothing, carrying her toward the door. "The bullets came out, but he needs ongoing treatment. Plasma transfusions, antibiotics, monitoring. You're a medical student. You'll understand the details. And he trusts you. After what he's been through, that trust is precious." "This is kidnapping," Elena said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "This is protection." Dominic's voice dropped lower, mine and yours, because the people who shot my 7-year-old son won't hesitate to hurt the woman who saved him if they think it will cause me pain. And it would. You gave Marco your blood. That makes you family now, whether you want it or not. The night air hit her face as they exited the hospital, and Elena saw a convoy of black SUVs waiting, engines running. Dr. Chen appeared beside them, his face grave. "Mr. Castellano, she needs rest, fluids, monitoring for at least. She'll have the best medical care available." Dominic settled Elena into the back of the middle SUV, where Marco was already strapped into a specialized gurney setup. "At my home, with a full medical staff. You're welcome to come supervise if you'd like, Doctor." Dr. Chen met Elena's eyes and she saw the apology there. He couldn't stop this. No one could stop Dominic Castellano once he'd made a decision. She'd learned that much in the past 10 minutes. "I'll check on her tomorrow," Dr. Chen said finally. "Elena, if you need anything, she'll have everything she needs." Dominic climbed in beside them, and the door closed with a sound of finality that made Elena's chest tighten. "Let's go home." The SUV pulled away from the hospital, and Elena watched her normal life disappear in the rearview mirror. Marco's small hand found hers in the darkness, his grip weak but determined. "Don't leave," he whispered. "Please don't leave me." Elena looked from the child to his father, saw the same desperate need in both their faces, and realized she'd made a choice the moment she'd offered her blood. She just hadn't understood the price yet. "I won't leave," she heard herself say. "I promise." Dominic's expression shifted, something that might have been relief or might have been regret crossing his features. "You shouldn't make promises to people like us. We collect on them." The drive took 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for winding roads that climbed into hills Elena had only seen from a distance. The convoy moved with military precision, and she counted at least 4 escort vehicles. Through the tinted windows she caught glimpses of mansions set back from the road, each more elaborate than the last, until they reached gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress. Wrought iron, 15 feet tall, with security cameras visible every few yards. The gates swung open silently, and they drove through onto a property that made Elena's breath catch despite everything. The main house was a Mediterranean villa that sprawled across the hilltop, all cream-colored stone and terracotta roof tiles with gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Lights blazed from every window, and she could see people moving inside. Staff, she realized, preparing for their arrival. "Welcome to your new home," Dominic said, and Elena couldn't tell if he was being sincere or ironic. "This isn't my home." But even as she said it, she knew how hollow it sounded. Her actual home was a basement apartment with mold in the corners and neighbors who screamed at each other through paper-thin walls. This place looked like something from a movie, the kind of wealth she'd never even imagined having access to. The SUV stopped at the main entrance, and suddenly there were people everywhere. Medical staff in scrubs, household staff in uniforms, security personnel in suits. They moved with coordinated efficiency, extracting Marco's gurney and wheeling him inside. Elena tried to follow, but her legs gave out again. This time, a woman caught her, older, with kind eyes and capable hands. "I'm Lucia, the head of household," she said in accented English. "You must be the angel who saved little Marco. Come, let's get you settled." "I need to stay with Marco." Elena pulled against Lucia's gentle grip. "He asked me not to leave." "And you won't." Dominic appeared beside them, having seemingly materialized from nowhere. "But you need fluids and rest first. Lucia will take you to the medical wing, get you set up in the room next to Marco's. You can see him as soon as you're stable." Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her in waves. She let Lucia guide her through marble hallways lined with art that probably cost more than her student loans, past rooms that seemed to go on forever until they reached what Lucia called the medical wing. It looked like a private hospital, complete with monitoring equipment, a pharmacy, and examination rooms. Marco's room was at the end of the hall, and through the open door, Elena could see doctors working on him, checking vitals, adjusting medications. Her room was next door, smaller but still more luxurious than any hospital room she'd ever seen. A real bed with silk sheets, a private bathroom, medical equipment that looked brand new. Lucia helped her onto the bed and started an IV with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. "How often does this happen?" Elena asked. "People getting hurt, needing this kind of care?" Lucia's expression shuddered. "Often enough that Mr. Castellano keeps a full medical staff on retainer. Now rest. Marco will want to see you when he wakes." But Elena couldn't rest. Every time she closed her eyes, She saw Marco's pale face, heard his whispered, "Angel," felt the weight of a promise she didn't know how to keep. She was a medical student who mopped floors and studied pharmacology, not someone equipped to navigate the world she'd stumbled into. Dominic Castellano was clearly dangerous, the kind of dangerous that came with armed escorts and enemies who shot children. The smart thing would be to run the moment she was strong enough. The problem was, she'd never been particularly smart about choosing self-preservation over helping others. It was why she'd gone into medicine despite the crushing debt, why she worked 3 jobs instead of taking the easier path, why she'd given her blood to a stranger without thinking about the consequences. Her mother had died when Elena was 16 because they couldn't afford the medication she needed, and Elena had promised herself then that she'd never let money or fear stop her from helping someone in need. Even if that someone came with a father who looked at her like she was simultaneously the answer to his prayers and the source of his next nightmare. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. The door opened and a young woman in scrubs entered, carrying a tray of food. "Mr. Castellano thought you might be hungry. I'm Maria, one of the nurses." The smell of real food, not vending machine snacks or day-old pizza, made Elena's stomach growl audibly. When had she last eaten a proper meal? Yesterday morning? The day before? Maria set the tray on the bedside table, revealing soup that steamed invitingly, fresh bread, fruit, and what looked like homemade pasta. "I can't accept this," Elena said, even as her hands reached for the spoon. "You saved Marco's life." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "That little boy is the light of this household. When we heard he'd been shot, when they said he might not survive, you gave us back our hope. Eat. It's the least we can do." Elena ate, and the food tasted like redemption. While she ate, Maria checked her vitals, adjusted her IV, and chattered about Marco, how he loved dinosaurs and soccer, how he'd been so sad since his mother died 3 years ago, how the shooting had happened during a family dinner at a restaurant that should have been safe. The details painted a picture Elena didn't want to see. A normal child caught in an abnormal world, suffering for sins he didn't commit. "Can I see him?" Elena asked when she'd finished eating. "Even if he's sleeping." Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Mr. Castellano said you could visit whenever you wanted. He's not usually so accommodating. You must have made quite an impression." They disconnected Elena's IV. She'd had enough fluids to be mobile, and Maria helped her to Marco's room. The boy was indeed sleeping, his small form nearly swallowed by the medical equipment surrounding him. But his color was better, his breathing steady, and when Elena approached the bed, his eyes fluttered open. "Angel lady," he murmured, a smile touching his lips. "You came." "I promised I wouldn't leave." Elena took his hand, careful of the IV lines. "How are you feeling, Piccolo?" "Hurts." His voice was small, frightened. "Papa says bad men tried to hurt me. I don't remember. Just loud noises and then nothing. You're safe now." Elena brushed hair back from his forehead, the gesture automatic, maternal. "Your papa has lots of people protecting you, and I'm right next door if you need anything. Will you stay?" His grip tightened on her hand. "Not just tonight. Always." The question hung in the air, too big for a 7-year-old to be asking, too important for Elena to answer without thinking. But looking at his hopeful face, seeing the fear lurking behind his eyes, she found herself nodding. "I'll stay as long as you need me." "I need you forever." He said it with the certainty of a child who didn't understand that forever was a long time, that promises made in moments of crisis rarely survived the light of day. "Papa needs you too. He just doesn't know it yet." Elena didn't know how to respond to that, so she just held his hand until he drifted back to sleep. When she finally left his room, she found Dominic waiting in the hallway, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't make promises to him either," he said quietly. "He's already lost too much. When you leave, it will hurt him." "Then I won't leave." The words came out before Elena could stop them, and she saw surprise flash across Dominic's face. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what staying here means." "Then tell me." Elena crossed her arms, exhaustion making her bold. "Explain it to me. Because right now, all I know is that a child needs help, and I can provide it. That's what I do. That's who I am." Dominic studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward a door at the end of the hall. "Come with me. We need to talk." The room he led her to was a library, all dark wood and leather furniture with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages. A fire burned in the marble fireplace despite the warm night, and Elena realized it was for ambiance, not warmth. This was a room designed to impress, to intimidate, to remind visitors of the wealth and power of its owner. Dominic poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, then offered one to Elena. She shook her head. He settled into a leather chair and gestured for her to sit opposite him. "Marco needs ongoing plasma treatments," he began without preamble. "The bullets caused internal damage that's going to take months to heal properly. He'll need transfusions every few weeks, maybe more often depending on how he responds. The doctors say your blood type, the specific antibodies you carry, are particularly compatible with his system. Using your plasma will give him the best chance at full recovery." "So, you want me to be his personal blood bank?" Elena tried to keep the bitterness from her voice and failed. "I want to pay you $50,000 a month to live here, provide plasma as needed, and help with Marco's recovery." Dominic's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was negotiating a business deal. "Your student loans will be paid in full. You'll have access to the best medical education available. I have connections at every major hospital and university in the country. When you graduate, you'll have your choice of residencies. All I ask in return is that you stay until Marco is healed." It was too much. The kind of offer that couldn't be real, that had to come with strings attached. Elena's mind raced, trying to find the catch, the hidden cost. "Why?" she asked finally. "You could hire professional medical staff. You clearly have the resources. Why me specifically?" "Because Marco trusts you." Dominic's voice softened slightly. "Because when he woke up after surgery, the first thing he asked for was the angel lady. Because in his worst moment, you were there, and now you represent safety to him. I can't buy that kind of trust. I can't manufacture it, but I can try to keep you here long enough for him to heal. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. You'll be driven home with a substantial thank you payment and round-the-clock security to keep you safe from anyone who might try to use you against me." He paused. "But Marco will be devastated, and his recovery will be harder, longer, more painful. You have the power to help him. The question is whether you're willing to use it." It was manipulation, pure and simple. Dominic Castellano was using his son's pain to pressure her into a decision she wasn't ready to make. Elena should have been angry. She should have walked out. But when she thought about Marco's small hand in hers, his whispered plea not to leave, she felt her resolve crumbling. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "You have until morning." Dominic stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Lucia will show you to your room. It's next to Marco's, as promised. Sleep on it. In the morning, we'll discuss terms." Elena let Lucia guide her to a bedroom that was somehow even more luxurious than the medical room. A king-size bed with what felt like 1,000 thread-count sheets, a bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her size. It was overwhelming, suffocating, everything she'd never had and never thought she'd want. She should have been planning her escape. Instead, she found herself standing at the window, looking out over gardens illuminated by subtle lighting, thinking about a 7-year-old boy who'd called her an angel and a dangerous man who'd dropped to his knees in gratitude. Her life had been small, manageable, predictable. Now it was spiraling into something she didn't recognize. A soft sound made her turn. The door had opened, and Marco stood there in pajamas that were too big for his thin frame, clutching a stuffed dinosaur to his chest. He looked so small, so vulnerable, and Elena's heart cracked a little wider. "I had a nightmare," he whispered, "about the loud noises. Can I stay with you?" Elena should have said no, should have called for a nurse, for his father, for anyone else. But she opened her arms instead, and Marco ran to her, burying his face against her stomach. She felt him shaking, heard his muffled sobs, and made a decision that would change everything. "Come on, Piccolo." She led him to the bed, helped him climb under the covers. "I'll keep you safe. No nightmares tonight." She lay down beside him, and Marco curled into her side like he'd been doing it his whole life. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, sleep claiming him. Elena stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a child's trust settling over her like a blanket. When morning came and Dominic found them like that, Elena and Marco tangled together in sleep, the boy's hand clutching her shirt like a lifeline. She saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Or hope. "I'll stay," Elena said before he could speak. "Not for the money, not for the education. For him. Because he needs me and I can't walk away from that." Dominic's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake. My world is dangerous. People get hurt. People die. You're signing up for things you can't imagine. Then protect me." Elena met his eyes steadily. "You said I'm family now because I saved Marco. Prove it. Keep me safe while I help your son heal." For a long moment, Dominic just stared at her. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, but understand this. Once you're in, you're in. There's no going back to your old life. The moment you agree to stay, everything changes." Everything already changed. Elena looked down at Marco, still sleeping peacefully. "The moment I gave him my blood, the moment I made that promise, I'm just accepting what I already knew was true." And so Elena Reyes, broke medical student who'd never imagined a life beyond survival, moved into the Castellano estate and began a journey that would transform her in ways she couldn't predict. The first weeks passed in a blur of routine. Twice-weekly plasma donations in the medical wing, monitoring Marco's recovery, helping him with schoolwork he'd missed. The boy was bright, curious, eager to learn, but trauma had left its mark. He startled at loud noises, had nightmares that sent him running to Elena's room, clung to her with desperate intensity whenever she tried to leave. Atekte Elena adapted. She moved her study materials to Marco's room so she could review pharmacology while he did homework. She learned to recognize the signs of an impending panic attack and developed techniques to calm him. She discovered he loved dinosaurs, so she ordered books about paleontology and they spent hours discussing T-Rexes and Triceratops. Slowly, carefully, she watched him transform from a traumatized victim into a child again. The household staff watched her with a mixture of curiosity and approval. Lucia brought her special meals, insisting she needed to keep her strength up for the donations. Maria, the nurse, became a friend, teaching Elena things about the Castellano family that no one else would say out loud. How Dominic's wife, Sophia, had died of cancer 3 years ago. How Marco had stopped speaking for 18 months afterward. How the shooting had reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. And Dominic himself was a constant, hovering presence. He attended every plasma donation, watching the process with an intensity that made Elena nervous. He joined them for dinner each evening, sitting at the head of a table that could seat 20, asking Marco about his day, listening to Elena's reports on his progress. He was always polite, always controlled, but Elena could feel the tension radiating from him, the constant vigilance of a man who'd learned that safety was an illusion. 6 weeks into her stay, everything shifted. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Elena was in the garden with Marco, teaching him about photosynthesis using the roses that grew along the south wall. The boy was laughing at her dramatic explanation of how plants turn sunlight into food. his voice carrying across the manicured lawn. Elena was demonstrating with elaborate hand gestures when Marco suddenly went quiet. She turned to find him staring at something behind her. Following his gaze, she saw a bicycle leaning against the garden shed, one of those expensive models with training wheels that could be removed as the child gained confidence. Marco's expression was a mixture of longing and fear. "Do you want to try it?" Elena asked gently. Marco shook his head. "I'll fall. I always fall. Everyone falls when they're learning. That's how you get better." Elena walked to the bike, wheeled it over. "I'll hold on. You won't fall unless I let you, and I won't let you." It took 20 minutes of coaxing, but eventually Marco climbed onto the seat. Elena gripped the back, running alongside as he pedaled tentatively. He wobbled, overcorrected, and crashed into the grass with a yelp that made Elena's heart stop. She rushed over, expecting tears, expecting the trauma to resurface. Instead, Marco looked up at her and laughed. Actually laughed, a sound of pure joy that she hadn't heard from him before. "Again!" he shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Again, Elena, again!" They spent the next hour like that. Marco falling and laughing, Elena pushing and encouraging, both of them covered in grass stains and grinning like fools. Elena didn't notice Dominic watching from his office window until Marco finally collapsed in the grass, exhausted and happy. "Papa!" Marco waved enthusiastically. "Did you see? I almost did it without Elena holding on." Dominic emerged from the house, moving with that predatory grace that always made Elena hyper-aware of his presence. He knelt beside his son, and Elena saw something in his face that made her chest tighten. Wonder, gratitude, and beneath it, grief for all the moments he'd missed, all the joy that had been stolen by violence and fear. "I saw, mio figlio." Dominic's voice was rough. "You were magnificent." Marco beamed, then grabbed both their hands. "We should do this every day, all of us together, like a real family." The words hung in the air, innocent and devastating. Elena started to pull away, to create distance from a fantasy that couldn't be real, but Dominic's grip tightened on her hand. He met her eyes over Marco's head, and she saw the question there, the possibility. "Like a real family?" Dominic repeated softly. "Yes, we should." That evening, after Marco had been put to bed, Dominic found Elena on the terrace where she'd retreated to study. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens, and the city lights twinkled in the distance like fallen stars. "Thank you," he said, settling into the chair beside her without asking permission. "For today. For all of it. I haven't seen him that happy since before Sophia died. He's a special kid." Elena closed her textbook, sensing this wasn't a conversation she could multitask through. "He deserves to be happy. He deserves a mother." Dominic poured wine from the bottle he'd brought, offering her a glass. This time, she accepted. Sophia was... She was everything. Patient, kind, strong. When she got sick, I threw every resource I had at saving her. The best doctors, experimental treatments, anything. But cancer doesn't care about money or power. It took her anyway, and I failed her. Failed Marco. "You didn't fail." Elena sipped the wine, surprised by its quality. "You fought for her. That's all anyone can do. I should have fought harder. Should have spent more time with them instead of building an empire. Should have protected them better." His hands tightened around his glass. "After she died, I threw myself into work. Told myself I was securing Marco's future, but really, I was just running from the grief. And Marco suffered for it. He stopped talking, stopped eating, stopped being a child. I didn't know how to reach him. But he's talking now. He's healing. Because of you." Dominic turned to face her fully. "You did in 6 weeks what I couldn't do in 3 years. You made him feel safe enough to be a child again. You gave him permission to be happy. That's not something I can ever repay. I don't want repayment. Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "I want Marco to keep healing. I want him to have a childhood despite everything he's been through. That's payment enough." Dominic studied her face in the moonlight, and Elena felt something shift between them. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an awareness she'd been trying to ignore. He was a dangerous man, a criminal, someone she should fear. But when he looked at her like this, she saw past the armor to the broken father underneath, and her heart responded in ways her brain insisted were foolish. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "When I ran your background, when I learned about your life, I thought I understood you. Poor student, desperate for money, willing to do anything to survive. But you're not desperate. You're not here for the money. You genuinely care about Marco, and that terrifies me." "Why would that terrify you?" "Because people I care about get hurt." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because my world is violent and unforgiving, and you're too good for it. Too pure. Eventually that goodness will be used against you, against us, and I won't be able to protect you." "Then teach me to protect myself." Elena set down her wine glass, leaning forward. "Stop treating me like I'm fragile. I grew up poor, Dominic. I watched my mother die because we couldn't afford her medication. I worked 3 jobs while carrying a full course load. I'm not some delicate flower that wilts at the first sign of hardship. I'm stronger than you think." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of belief. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Elena's breath caught. "I'm starting to see that," he murmured, "and it makes me want things I have no right to want." Before Elena could ask what he meant, an alarm shattered the moment. Dominic was on his feet instantly, phone in hand, barking orders in Italian. Security personnel materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. "What's happening?" Elena stood, fear spiking through her. "Breach at the north gate. Could be nothing. Could be everything." Dominic gripped her shoulders, his face hard. "Go to Marco. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Lucia, understand?" Elena nodded and ran. She found Marco sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear, and gathered him into her arms. "It's okay, Piccolo. Just a security check. Your papa is handling it." They sat together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the household mobilizing for potential danger, and Elena realized how completely her life had changed. 2 months ago, her biggest worry had been making rent. Now she was comforting a child during a security breach at a Mafia compound, and the strangest part was that it felt right, natural, like this was where she was meant to be. The all-clear came an hour later. False alarm. A deer had triggered the perimeter sensors. But the incident left Elena shaken, forced her to confront the reality of the world she'd entered. This wasn't a fairy tale. The danger was real, constant, and she was now part of it whether she'd intended to be or not. Dominic came to check on them after the situation was resolved, his expression softening when he saw Elena and Marco curled together in the bed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is what I meant about my world being dangerous. You shouldn't have to live like this." "But I do." Elena met his eyes steadily. "Because Marco needs me, and I made a promise. So either accept that I'm staying and teach me how to survive here, or spend every day waiting for me to run. Your choice." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow we start your training. If you're going to be part of this family, you need to know how to protect yourself, how to protect Marco." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You might hate me by the time we're done." The training was brutal. Dominic assigned her a security detail. 4 men who rotated shifts, staying close but not intrusive. He taught her to recognize threats, to trust her instincts, to move through the estate with awareness of exits and security measures. He had his head of security, a former Special Forces operative named Vincent, teach her basic self-defense. Elena threw herself into it with the same determination she applied to her medical studies, learning to channel fear into action. And through it all, Marco continued to heal. His nightmares became less frequent. His laughter came more easily. He started attending a private school on the estate grounds, making friends with the children of other household staff. Elena watched him transform and felt a fierce pride that surprised her with its intensity. 3 months into her stay, Elena realized she'd stopped thinking of the estate as temporary. She'd stopped mentally planning her escape, stopped maintaining emotional distance. Somewhere along the way, this had become home. Marco had become her child in all but biology. And Dominic had become something she didn't have words for yet. It was late evening, and she was in the library reviewing case studies when he found her. He'd been away for 3 days on business, the kind of business she didn't ask about, and his absence had left a hole she hadn't expected. "How was your trip?" she asked, closing her laptop. "Productive." He poured himself a drink, then joined her on the leather sofa. "How's Marco?" "Good. He got an A on his science project. Asked about you every day." Elena paused. "I asked about you too." Dominic's eyes sharpened. "Did you?" "I missed you." The admission came out before she could stop it. "I shouldn't have. I should maintain professional distance. But I missed you, and I don't know what to do with that." He set down his drink carefully like he was buying time to think. "Elena." "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't tell me all the reasons this is a bad idea. Don't remind me that you're dangerous, that I should leave, that this can't work. I know all of it. But I also know that when you're here, I feel safer than I've ever felt in my life. That when you look at Marco, I see the kind of father I always wished I'd had. That when you look at me—" She trailed off, unable to finish. "When I look at you, I see everything I thought I'd lost when Sophia died." Dominic's voice was raw. Hope. Light. The possibility of happiness. "You terrify me, Elena, because I'm falling in love with you, and love in my world is a weakness that gets exploited." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm falling in love with you too. I've been trying not to, but I can't help it. You should help it." But even as he said it, Dominic reached for her, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted his words. "You should run from me, from this life, from everything I represent." "I'm tired of running." Elena leaned into his touch. "I'm tired of being alone, of surviving instead of living. You and Marco, you've given me something I didn't know I needed. A family, a purpose, a reason to stop just surviving and start actually being alive." Dominic's thumb traced her cheekbone and she saw the war raging behind his eyes. Desire versus responsibility. Want versus wisdom. Then he made his choice, closing the distance between them and pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she'd shatter. But Elena had never been fragile, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she'd been suppressing for months. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, into the safety and strength and unexpected tenderness he offered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything." "Good." Elena smiled. "I'm ready for everything to change." A small sound made them both turn. Marco stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a knowing smile on his face. "I knew it. I told you Papa needed you too." Elena laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and joyful. "Come here, Piccolo." Marco ran to them, and Dominic lifted him onto the sofa between them. The three of them sat there in the quiet library tangled together, and Elena felt something click into place. This was family. Not perfect, not conventional, but real and true and worth fighting for. "Does this mean Elena's staying forever now?" Marco asked, looking between them hopefully. Dominic met Elena's eyes over his son's head. "If she'll have us, both of us, for however long forever turns out to be." Forever, Elena agreed and meant it, but forever, it turned out, came with complications she hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Dominic's consigliere, a sharp-eyed man named Antonio, requested a meeting. Elena sat in Dominic's office, Marco playing with his dinosaurs on the floor, while Antonio laid out intelligence that made her blood run cold. "The Russo family has been asking questions," Antonio said, his voice grave. "They know about the shooting, know that Marco survived. They're trying to determine who helped him, who's been living here. It's only a matter of time before they identify Elena." "Then we increase security." Dominic's voice was hard. "Double the guards. No one gets in or out without my approval." "It's not enough." Antonio pulled out photos, surveillance shots of Elena at the hospital, at the estate gates, in the garden with Marco. "They already have her face. They know she matters to you, to Marco. That makes her a target." Elena felt ice flood her veins. She'd known, intellectually, that danger existed, but seeing photographic proof of being watched, being hunted, made it visceral and real. "What do you recommend?" Dominic asked, his hand finding Elena's under the desk, squeezing tight. "Eliminate the threat." Antonio's expression was grim. "The Russos have been a problem for years. This gives us justification to end them permanently." "No." Elena's voice was sharp, surprising everyone, including herself. "No more killing. There has to be another way." Antonio looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "Miss Reyes, with all respect, you don't understand how this world works. The Russos won't stop. They'll keep coming until they hurt you, hurt Marco, hurt everyone Dominic cares about. The only way to stop them is permanently." "Then we leave." Elena turned to Dominic. "Take Marco somewhere safe. Start over. You have the resources. We could disappear." "Running shows weakness." Dominic's jaw was tight. "It invites more attacks. No, Antonio's right. We end this threat before it ends us." Elena pulled her hand from his, standing abruptly. "So, you're going to kill people? How many? Just the Russos? Or everyone who might potentially threaten us in the future? Where does it stop, Dominic?" "It stops when my family is safe." He stood too, his voice rising. "You don't get to judge me for protecting what's mine. You don't get to stand in my world and demand I play by rules that don't exist here. Then maybe I don't belong in your world." The words came out before Elena could stop them, and she saw something shatter in Dominic's expression. Marco's small voice cut through the tension. "Don't fight. Please don't fight." They both turned to find him standing, tears streaming down his face, his dinosaurs forgotten on the floor. "I don't want Elena to leave. I don't want bad men to hurt us. I just want us to be happy. Why can't we just be happy?" Elena knelt beside him, pulling him into her arms. "We can, Piccolo. We will. I'm sorry. I'm not leaving. I promised you, remember? But you're mad at Papa." "I'm scared," Elena corrected gently. "Scared of losing you. Scared of this world I don't understand. But I'm not leaving. Never." She looked up at Dominic over Marco's head, saw the conflict raging in his eyes. He was trying to protect them the only way he knew how, with violence and power. And she was trying to save them from becoming monsters in the process. Neither of them was wrong, but neither was entirely right either. "We'll find a way," Dominic said finally, his voice softer. "A way that keeps everyone safe without compromising who we are. Both of us. All of us." Antonio cleared his throat. "With respect, sir, we don't have time for philosophical debates. The Russos are moving. We have intelligence suggesting an attack is imminent. We need to act. Then we act defensively." Dominic's voice hardened into command. Lockdown protocol. No one in or out without my explicit approval. Marco's school sessions move entirely on-site. Elena's security detail increases to 6 men. We fortify and wait. And if they attack anyway, then we defend. Dominic's eyes were cold, and God help them if they get anywhere near my family. The lockdown began immediately. Elena watched the estate transform into a fortress. Additional security personnel, armed guards at every entrance, surveillance systems upgraded. Even the gardens monitored 24/7. She couldn't go to campus anymore, so her classes moved online. Her plasma donations continued, but now they happened under armed guard. The life she'd built, fragile as it was, contracted to the boundaries of the estate. Marco handled it better than she expected. He was used to security, used to restrictions, but Elena felt the walls closing in, felt the weight of being trapped, even in luxury. She threw herself into studying, into caring for Marco, into anything that would distract her from the growing tension. A week into the lockdown, late at night, she found Dominic in Marco's room, watching his son sleep. She stood in the doorway, taking in the picture they made, dangerous man and innocent child, love and violence coexisting in the same frame. "I can't lose either of you," Dominic whispered without turning. "I survived losing Sophia, barely. But if something happened to Marco, to you, I wouldn't survive that. I'd burn the world down trying." Elena crossed the room, standing beside him. "Then don't let it come to that. Find another way. Be smarter than your enemies instead of just more violent." "What if smart isn't enough?" "Then we'll face it together." She took his hand. "All 3 of us, as a family. But we don't compromise who we are in the process. We don't become the monsters we're fighting against." Dominic pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. "You make me want to be better, to be the man Marco thinks I am, the man you see when you look at me. But I don't know if I can be that person and still keep you safe." "You don't have to choose." Elena tilted her face up to his. "You can be both, protective and good, strong and kind, the father Marco needs and the man I love. You're already all of those things. You just have to believe it." He kissed her then, deep and searching, like he was trying to memorize her through touch. When they broke apart, his eyes were wet. "I love you," he said. "I didn't think I'd ever say those words again. Didn't think I deserved to. But I love you, Elena. Completely. Terrifyingly. In ways that make me vulnerable, and that vulnerability could destroy us all." "Then let it." Elena smiled through her own tears. "Let love make you vulnerable. Let it make you human. That's not weakness, Dominic. That's strength." A sound from the bed made them both turn. Marco sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Are you two being mushy again? Lucia says you're always being mushy now." Elena laughed, the sound, breaking the tension. "Go back to sleep, Piccolo." "Only if you both stay." Marco patted the bed beside him. "Like a real family." So they did. Elena and Dominic climbed into Marco's bed, the boy between them, and lay there in the darkness. It should have been uncomfortable. 3 people in a bed meant for 1. But instead it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "When this is over," Dominic said quietly, "when the threat is gone and we're safe again, I want to make this official. I want you to marry me, Elena. I want Marco to have a mother again. I want us to be a real family, not just pretending." Elena's heart stuttered. "Are you proposing to me in our son's bed?" "Our son?" Dominic repeated the words like a prayer. "Yes. He's ours now, isn't he? Both of ours. And I'm proposing wherever and whenever I can, because I've learned that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So, yes, I'm proposing in Marco's bed, in the middle of a lockdown, surrounded by danger. Marry me, Elena. Say yes." "Yes." The word came without hesitation. Yes, to all of it. To you, to Marco, to this impossible, dangerous, beautiful life we're building. Yes. Marco's sleepy voice interrupted them. Does this mean I can call Elena Mama now? Elena felt tears spill over. If you want to, Piccolo. If you're ready. I'm ready. Marco snuggled closer to her. I've been ready since you saved me. You're my angel mama. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, a family forged in blood and choice and love. And when morning came with news that the FBI had arrested key Russo family members on unrelated charges, when the threat level dropped and the lockdown began to lift, Elena felt like maybe they'd survive this after all. But she'd forgotten that in Dominic's world, threats came from unexpected directions. The FBI arrests weren't random. They were part of a larger investigation into organized crime, and Dominic's family was on the list. A detective named Morrison showed up at the estate 3 days later with a warrant and questions Elena couldn't answer. Miss Reyes. Morrison was middle-aged, tired-looking, with eyes that had seen too much. I need to ask you about your relationship with Dominic Castellano. They sat in the library, Dominic's lawyers present, while Morrison laid out evidence of crimes Elena had suspected but never confirmed. Money laundering, racketeering, extortion. The man she loved had built his empire on violence and corruption, and now the law was closing in. I'm a medical student, Elena said carefully. I provide plasma donations for Marco's recovery. That's all. That's all. Morrison pulled out financial records. You've received over $200,000 in payments in the last 4 months. Your student loans were paid off in full. You live in a mansion worth $30 million. You're not just a medical student, Miss Reyes. You're part of this organization now, whether you admit it or not. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd known the money was substantial, but seeing it laid out in black and white made it real, made her complicit. I helped a dying child, she said firmly. That's not a crime. No, but conspiracy to commit money laundering is. Morrison leaned forward. I can offer you immunity. Full protection. A fresh start. All you have to do is testify about what you've seen, what you know about Castellano's operations. Help us build our case. And if I refuse, then you'll be charged as an accomplice. Morrison's expression was grim. You're a good person, Elena. I've read your file. You worked 3 jobs to put yourself through medical school. You volunteer at free clinics. You don't belong in this world. Let me help you get out. Elena looked at Dominic's lawyer, saw the warning in his eyes. Anything she said could be used against them. But she also saw the way out Morrison was offering, a chance to return to her normal life, to escape the danger and complexity of loving a man like Dominic. I need time to think, she said finally. Morrison nodded. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires and the charges proceed. Choose wisely, Miss Reyes. Your whole future depends on it. After Morrison left, Elena found Dominic in his office, staring out the window at gardens he might lose, at a life that was crumbling. She wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, but she didn't know what to say. How did you comfort someone when you were part of the problem? You should take his offer, Dominic said without turning. Testify. Save yourself. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when I fell in love with you. Elena crossed the room, standing beside him. When I promised Marco I'd stay, I'm not abandoning you now. Even if it means prison? He finally looked at her and she saw the fear lurking behind his controlled expression. Even if it means losing your medical license, your future, everything you've worked for? Even then. Elena took his hand. We'll figure this out, together. There might not be a way out. His voice cracked slightly. Morrison's right. You're a good person. You don't deserve to go down with me. Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. Elena's voice was fierce. I'm not leaving. Not for Morrison. Not for the FBI. Not for anyone. You and Marco are my family now. That means something to me. It means everything." Dominic pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." Elena smiled against his chest. "But you're stuck with me anyway." They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other until Marco's voice interrupted them. "Papa?" "Elena, why is everyone sad?" Elena turned to find him in the doorway, his expression worried. She crossed to him, kneeling to his level. "We're not sad, Piccolo. Just thinking about grown-up things." "About the policeman?" Marco's eyes were too knowing for a 7-year-old. "I heard him talking. He wants Elena to leave, but she's not leaving, right? She promised." "I'm not leaving," Elena confirmed. "I promised you, and I keep my promises." "Even if it's hard?" "Especially if it's hard." Elena pulled him into a hug. "That's what family does. We stick together no matter what." Marco hugged her back fiercely, then looked at his father. "Papa, you have to fix this. You fix everything. Fix this too." Dominic's expression softened. "I'm trying, mio figlio. I'm trying." The next 48 hours were a blur of lawyers and strategy sessions and contingency plans. Dominic's legal team was formidable, but even they admitted the case against him was strong. The FBI had been building it for years, and Elena's involvement had given them a new angle, a sympathetic witness who could humanize their target while also implicating him. Elena spent the time with Marco, trying to maintain normalcy for him even as their world teetered on the edge of collapse. They did schoolwork and played games and pretended everything was fine. But at night, when Marco was asleep, Elena lay awake and wondered if she'd made the right choice. If staying was brave or just stupid. If love was worth the price they might all pay. On the morning of the deadline, she found Dominic in the library surrounded by legal documents. He looked exhausted, defeated in a way she'd never seen before. "I have a plan," he said before she could speak. "It's risky, but it might work. I can make Morrison's case fall apart by sacrificing some of my lower-level operations. Give him enough to look good without actually touching the core of my business. But it requires you to testify." "What?" Elena sat down heavily. "You want me to work with Morrison?" "I want you to appear to work with him." Dominic's eyes were calculating now, the businessman emerging. "You'll take the immunity deal. You'll testify about what you've seen, but everything you tell them will be carefully controlled information that I feed you. You'll think you're helping them build a case, but really you'll be leading them away from anything that matters. You want me to lie to the FBI." Elena felt sick. "To commit perjury." "I want you to survive." Dominic's voice was hard. "This is how my world works, Elena. We don't play fair because fair doesn't exist. We do what we have to do to protect our own." "And if I get caught? If they figure out I'm lying?" "Then I'll make sure you're protected. My lawyers are the best, but it won't come to that if we're careful." He reached for her hand. "I know what I'm asking. I know it goes against everything you believe in, but it's the only way I can see to keep you safe. Keep Marco safe and keep our family together." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him there had to be another way, a better way, a way that didn't require her to become someone she wasn't. But looking at his desperate face, thinking about Marco sleeping upstairs, she realized she'd already made her choice the moment she decided to stay. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tell me what to say." The testimony happened a week later in a federal courthouse that felt like a tomb. Elena sat in a chair that was too hard, facing prosecutors who looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion, and told them the story Dominic's lawyers had crafted. She talked about the blood donation, about moving to the estate to help Marco recover, about the payments she'd received for medical services. She admitted to seeing security personnel and hearing conversations she didn't understand, but claimed ignorance about any criminal activity. "Miss Reyes," the lead prosecutor pressed, "are you telling us that in 4 months of living with Dominic Castellano, You never once suspected he was involved in organized crime. I knew he was wealthy and powerful, Elena said, keeping her voice steady. I knew he had security because his son had been shot, but I'm a medical student, not a detective. I focused on Marco's recovery, not on investigating his father's business dealings. It was technically true, which made the lie easier to sell. She had focused on Marco. She had chosen not to dig too deeply into Dominic's world. The prosecutors weren't satisfied, but her immunity deal was binding, and eventually they had to let her go. Elena walked out of that courthouse feeling dirty, compromised, like she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Dominic was waiting in the car, and when she climbed in, he pulled her into his arms. "You were perfect," he murmured. "You saved us." But Elena didn't feel like a savior. She felt like a liar, a criminal, someone who'd betrayed her own values for love, and the worst part was knowing she'd do it again if it meant keeping her family together. The case against Dominic stalled after her testimony. Without her cooperation, the prosecutors struggled to build the narrative they needed. Some of Dominic's lower-level associates were arrested and charged, but he remained untouched, protected by layers of legal insulation and carefully maintained deniability. Life at the estate returned to something approaching normal. Marco continued to heal, his treatments becoming less frequent as his body recovered. Elena finished her semester with straight A's despite everything, proving she could juggle medical school and moral compromise with equal skill. And her relationship with Dominic deepened, moving past the initial rush of attraction into something more complex and real. But the weight of what she'd done lingered. She'd see Morrison's disappointed face in her dreams, hear his words about being a good person who didn't belong in this world. She'd wonder if he was right, if she'd lost herself in the process of finding a family. 6 months after the testimony, on a quiet evening when Marco was at a sleepover with another staff member's child, Dominic found Elena in the garden where this had all begun. She was sitting on the bench where they'd first talked about love and vulnerability, staring at nothing. "You've been distant lately," he said, settling beside her. "Talk to me." "I lied to the FBI for you." Elena's voice was flat. "I committed perjury. I became exactly what Morrison warned me I'd become. A criminal." "You protected your family." Dominic took her hand. "That doesn't make you a criminal. It makes you human." "Does it?" Elena turned to face him. "Because I don't feel human anymore. I feel like I've lost something essential, some part of myself that I can't get back. And the worst part is that I'd do it again. For you. For Marco. I'd lie and cheat and break every rule I ever believed in, and that terrifies me." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When Sophia died, I made a choice. I chose to protect Marco at any cost, even if it meant becoming a monster. I told myself it was necessary, that the ends justified the means. But you've made me question that. Made me wonder if there's a way to be strong without being cruel, to protect without destroying. I don't have the answers." Elena's voice cracked. "I thought I did. I thought I could be the moral compass, the voice of reason, the one who kept you from going too far. But I went too far myself, and now I don't know who I am anymore. You're the woman who saved my son's life." Dominic cupped her face in his hands. "You're the woman who made us a family again. You're the woman I love more than I thought possible. That hasn't changed. You haven't changed, not in the ways that matter." "Haven't I?" Elena searched his eyes. "I used to believe in absolute right and wrong. Now I live in shades of gray. I used to think love was simple. Now I know it's the most complicated thing in the world. Welcome to being human." Dominic smiled sadly. "None of us are purely good or purely evil. We're all just trying to survive, to protect the people we love, to find meaning in a world that doesn't make sense. You haven't lost yourself, Elena. You've just grown up." Maybe he was right. Maybe this was what growth looked like. Messy and painful and morally ambiguous. Maybe love wasn't about maintaining your ideals, but about choosing which compromises you could live with. "I'm still angry," Elena said, "at you for putting me in that position, at myself for going along with it, at the world for being so complicated. Be angry." Dominic pulled her close. "Rage at me. Hate me if you need to. But don't leave. Don't give up on us because we're imperfect, because I promise you I'm trying to be better. For you, for Marco, for the family we're building." Elena let herself be held, let the anger and fear and confusion wash over her, and underneath it all, she felt love. Stubborn, persistent, refusing to be drowned by doubt. She loved this man despite his flaws, despite his world, despite everything. And that love was worth fighting for, worth compromising for, worth becoming someone new for. "I'm not leaving," she said finally. "I'm just adjusting, learning to live with choices I never thought I'd make. We'll learn together." Dominic kissed her forehead. "And maybe we'll figure out how to be good people in a bad world, or at least how to be good to each other." 3 months later, Dominic proposed properly. Not in Marco's bed during a crisis, but on the terrace where they'd first talked about love, with the city lights spread out below them like fallen stars. He got down on one knee, presented a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, and asked Elena to marry him with words that were simple and true. "I love you. Marco loves you. We want you to be ours officially, legally, permanently. Will you marry me?" Elena said yes without hesitation, and this time there was no danger lurking, no federal investigation, no moral crisis. Just two people choosing each other, choosing family, choosing to build something good from complicated materials. The wedding happened 2 months later in the estate gardens, with Marco as the ring bearer and 50 guests who represented the strange blend of worlds Elena now inhabited: medical school friends and household staff, Dominic's business associates, and Elena's former professors. It was small and intimate and perfect, with vows they'd written themselves that spoke of love and protection and choosing each other every day. When the priest pronounced them married, Marco cheered louder than anyone, running to hug them both. "Now, we're really a family," he announced, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or acceptance, or just the knowledge that she'd found where she belonged, however unlikely that place might be. The year that followed was the happiest of Elena's life. She graduated medical school at the top of her class and began her residency at Sacred Heart Hospital, the same place where she'd saved Marco's life, now coming full circle. Dominic began transitioning his business toward more legitimate enterprises, slowly untangling himself from the criminal world that had defined him for so long. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks, but Elena saw the effort and loved him more for trying. Marco thrived. His physical recovery was complete, and his emotional healing continued steadily. He made friends at school, joined a soccer team, developed a passion for paleontology that led to weekend trips to museums and dig sites. He called Elena Mama, without hesitation now, and the title filled her with a joy she'd never expected. But the past had a way of catching up, and 2 years after the wedding, Elena found herself back in a federal courthouse, not as a witness this time, but as a defendant. Morrison had never stopped investigating, and he'd found evidence of her perjury, phone records and emails that proved she'd coordinated with Dominic's lawyers before her. Testimony. "You lied to us," Morrison said during their first meeting after her arrest. "You looked me in the eye and lied, and I believed you because I wanted to believe you were still a good person." "I am a good person." Elena's voice was steady despite her fear. "I just love my family more than I love being perfect." "Love doesn't justify perjury." Morrison's expression was hard. "You're facing 5 years in federal prison. Your medical license will be revoked. Everything you worked for, everything you are, will be destroyed. Was it worth it?" Elena thought about Marco's laughter, about Dominic's arms around her at night, about the family they'd built from blood and choice and stubborn determination. "Yes," she said simply, "it was worth it." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented their evidence, painting Elena as a criminal who'd chosen love over law, who'd corrupted herself for a man who didn't deserve her loyalty. The defense argued she'd been coerced, manipulated, that she was a victim of Dominic's world rather than a willing participant. But Elena knew the truth was more complex than either side wanted to admit. She'd made her choices freely, with full knowledge of the consequences. She'd chosen family over rules, love over ideals, and she wouldn't apologize for that even if it cost her everything. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Elena sat in the courthouse, Dominic beside her, Marco too young to attend but waiting at home with Lucia. She'd prepared herself for prison, for losing her medical license, for paying the price of her choices. But when the jury returned with a verdict of not guilty on all counts, she felt her knees buckle with relief. Later, Morrison approached her outside the courthouse. "You got lucky," he said. "The jury saw a woman in love, not a criminal. But I know the truth. You're not the person I thought you were when we first met. You're right." Elena met his eyes steadily. "I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone who understands that life is complicated, that love requires sacrifice, that being good isn't always about following rules. I'm someone who chose family over everything else, and I'd make the same choice again." Morrison shook his head. "I hope it's worth it when your son grows up in a world of violence and corruption." "My son is growing up in a world of love and protection." Elena's voice was firm. "His father is working to leave that violent world behind. We're building something better, something good, and we're doing it together. That's all any family can do." She walked away from Morrison, from the courthouse, from the last remnants of her old life. Dominic was waiting by the car, and when she reached him, he pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he said. "Really, over this time. No more investigations, no more trials. Just us." "Just us," Elena agreed. "And Marco, and whatever comes next." What came next was a life more normal than Elena had dared hope for. Dominic's transition to legitimate business continued, and while he never completely left his old world behind, he found ways to protect his family while maintaining his power. Elena completed her residency and opened a free clinic in an underserved neighborhood, using the resources Dominic provided to help people who reminded her of her younger self, poor, desperate, trying to survive. Marco grew into a thoughtful, kind teenager who wanted to be a doctor like his mother. He knew about his father's past, about the violence and danger that had shaped their family, but he also knew about love and sacrifice and choosing to be better. Elena and Dominic made sure of that, raising him with honesty about where they'd been and hope for where they were going. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Elena found herself back in the garden where Dominic had first proposed. She was watching Marco play soccer with some friends, laughing and carefree, when Dominic joined her on the bench. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, "giving your blood that night, starting all of this?" Elena thought about the question seriously. She thought about everything she'd gained: family, love, purpose, and everything she'd lost: innocence, idealism, the simple certainty of right and wrong. She thought about the compromises she'd made, the lines she'd crossed, the person she'd become. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it, not for a second." Even knowing what it would cost? Especially knowing what it would cost. Elena took his hand. "Because the alternative was walking away from the best thing that ever happened to me. Walking away from you and Marco. Walking away from becoming who I was meant to be." Dominic pulled her close, and they sat together in the fading light, watching their son play. And Elena realized that this messy, complicated, imperfect life they'd built was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. Not perfection, but belonging. Not ideals, but love. Not certainty, but family. The blood she'd given that desperate night in the hospital had bound her to this family in ways she couldn't have predicted. It had changed her, transformed her, made her into someone she barely recognized. But it had also saved her, given her purpose, showed her what it meant to truly live instead of just survive. And that, Elena thought as Marco's laughter rang across the garden, was worth every compromise, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. Because in the end, love wasn't about staying pure or maintaining your ideals. It was about choosing someone every day, despite the cost. It was about building a family from blood and choice and stubborn determination. It was about being brave enough to become someone new. "I love you," she said to Dominic, the words as true now as they'd been the first time she'd spoken them. "I love you too," he replied. "Thank you for saving us. All of us. Thank you for letting me." Elena smiled. "For giving me a family. For making me brave enough to choose love over everything else." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Elena felt complete. Not perfect, never perfect, but whole in a way she'd never been before. She'd started as a broke student trying to survive, and she'd become a woman who'd found her place in the world, not despite the complications, but because of them. And when Marco ran over, breathless and happy, throwing himself between them with the casual affection of a child who'd never doubted he was loved, Elena knew she'd made the right choice. Every single time, in every single moment, she'd choose this. Choose them. Choose family. Because in the end, that's what the blood had taught her. That family wasn't about biology or perfection or following rules. It was about showing up, making sacrifices, choosing each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And Elena Reyes Castellano, once a broke student who'd given her blood to save a dying child, had learned that lesson better than anyone. She'd given her blood, her future, her very self to this family. And in return, they'd given her everything that mattered. A home, a purpose, a love worth fighting for, and that was worth more than all the blood in the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional tales of love, sacrifice, and family. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances and the power of choosing love over everything else. Drop a comment telling me which moment resonated with you most. I read every single one, and your support means the world. Thank you for being here and experiencing Elena's journey with me.